Lawyers of Reddit, what is the most outrageous case someone has asked you to take? Story 1. I worked on a custody dispute between a mother and grandmother, where both sides were absolutely outraged by the other's claims. The mother was very upset that she was alleged to have been a stripper. I was a sex worker, but I was never a stripper. The grandmother, in return, was furious that she was alleged to have 21 cats in her two-bedroom apartment. We only have 17 cats. How dare she flat out lie and say that we have 21 cats? The child ended up living with the father in a different state. Story 2. A year out of law school, I once had a potential client who wanted me to sue Canada. Apparently he could not get into the country due to his felony record. I tried to reason with him that it was up to the sovereign nation to set its own rules regarding entry to the country, but he insisted that we could make a lot of money suing Canada. I didn't take the case, but I told him I might be able to get him a letter that said, "Sorry, from Canada, edit, it's to its." I dictated this on my phone as I was getting coffee. Thank God for the grammar people on Reddit for saving me from this catastrophic mistake in life. This reminds me of Better Call Saul, when that crazy dude wanted to sue the government to make his ranch a sovereign state, or something like that. Saul wanted to take the case because of how many hours he could bill. He needed cash, but then the guy tried to pay him in his own currency he created for his new sovereign state, saying it would be worth billions once they won their case. LMAO. Story 3. I work in patent law, and most of my cases are pretty mundane, small variations on items that you use every day, with enough innovation to warrant trying to profit off of it. Sometimes you get one that's actually innovative, which are the fun cases, but occasionally you get the client that's just a complete wacko. This guy, let's call him Vlad, strides into my office and lets me know he has a spectacular invention that he wants to show me, but that I must keep it secret. Vlad is a heavy-set Russian, the kind you'd expect to see in a gangster movie, with a thick accent to match. I explained that I would be happy to sign an NDA and that confidentiality will be assured. Once he was appeased that his mysterious invention wouldn't be on the front page of the Times tomorrow, he asked me to come out to his office so he could show me. Now, I was a little nervous, given his physique and the secrecy with which he was handling all of this, so I asked one of our clerks to accompany me. I drove the three of us to his office, in complete silence. Any small talk I tried to make was stonewalled. Finally we got to his office building, which thankfully looked to be a legit workspace and not a back alley warehouse as I'd originally feared. He took us to a side office once we got to his floor, and pulled me aside. "This will be my greatest achievement," he whispered, before opening the door with a flourish. In the room there was nothing but a single bright red word painted on the wall. "What is this?" I asked him. He stood over me and gazed directly into my eyes, breathing. "I call it the Sirius tag. OP forgot to put one." Story 4. As a public defender, I defended a grown man accused of stealing magic cards from Walmart. There was an hour-long security video meticulously showing, from dozens of angles, that he was picking up sets of cards, unwrapping them and discarding the wrappers around the store. He insisted that he was innocent, and we actually went to a jury trial instead of securing a plea deal. It took the jury 8 minutes to convict him, and the judge laid into my client telling him that he was the worst thief he had ever seen. I forgot the best part. At one point in the trial I had to spend 45 minutes explaining to the judge what magic cards are. He couldn't understand why anyone need more than one deck. Story 5. Family law attorney here. I just had a custody case go back to court over eyeglasses. My client didn't like the glasses her ex bought the kid. So stupid. I want to go back to criminal defense. Gang homicide cases had nicer people to deal with than family law. Story 6. I recall that the lawyer whom I first did work experience under described family law as the single most miserable godforsaken profession that has ever existed upon this earth. Comment: I was recently in court for an adoption hearing. I am adopting my stepdaughter, so we needed the hearing to establish the identity of the father and then terminate his parental rights. The hearing went great, The father didn't show but called the court in advance to let them know he wasn't contesting, and the judge ruled in our favor. The craziest part was when the judge was basically pleading with us to hold the final adoption hearing because they have very few happy moments in their courtroom and most people just do everything by mail. I wasn't planning on it, but we may actually have the hearing just for the court staff's benefit. Story 7. My dad sued my mom for a model boat of some river steamer. Wood thing that was never finished. My uncle wrote a very vulgar and offensive phrase down the side of it and delivered it to my dad. The judge had a chuckle until my dad tried to sue for the pots and pans. Edit, thanks for the gold. I'll share with mums that internet strangers enjoy my father's stupidity as much as we do. Story 8. I had a potential client come in and say that he wanted to sue his uncle for murder. Setting aside the fact that you can't sue someone for murder, I asked him who did his uncle murder. He replied, me. I turned the case down. Story 9. While working at a plaintiff's employment firm, 2 memorable consults came in. Guy gets fired for being late too much, wants to sue for discrimination because he has a sugar addiction and needs to stop at 7 to 11 for a big gulp before his shift begins. As a result, he usually ends up missing the bus. A woman comes in. She was a bus driver and was terminated during her probationary period. She had 3 accidents in 6 weeks. She wants to sue for discrimination because she has anxiety and a therapy rabbit. All the while sitting at the conference room table petting the therapy bunny. Story 10. I used to work at a firm that did workers' comp bad faith, and then also did maritime personal injury plaintiffs' work. The best stories come from the maritime guys. I'm not a lawyer, and this was before my time, but it was one of those stories that just got told about crazy clients. Point 1. Guy was hurt offshore, legit injury, but drilling company won't settle, so it goes to trial. The guy is from some small rural town in East Texas, and that is where the trial is set. During one of his depositions, our client shows up in a t-shirt that has a silhouette of a woman dangling from a stripper pole. At the bottom there is text that says, "I support single mothers." Perfect. Just what we need for a video deposition. Later, if I'm not confusing 2 clients, we go to trial, and right as it's about to start the client goes, "I was hoping we didn't get this, judge," and our lawyer thinks that is strange and asks him why he hoped that. Apparently, our client caused the death of the judge's nephew something during a breaking and entering via the stand your ground/castle doctrine a few years prior. It was a huge case in this little small town, and it was something the client neglected to mention at any point prior. Perfect. Great thing to know as trial is beginning. We won the case. Still not sure how. Edit. The client was a captain, an American, for a boat offshore from Africa. Most of the crew was African. One of the crew stabbed the captain, which led to our involvement. Jury ended up awarding a huge amount and was later upheld by the Court of Appeals. The deposition was not videotaped. I'm trying to find more details on the link with the judge and the plaintiff, but judge appeared to be impartial. Comment, well, if the nephew was killed during a breaking and entering and the plaintiff isn't in jail, he was likely the one being burglarized. So maybe the judge was all, well, sucks for my nephew, but my nephew was a very troubled person with a substance abuse problem. A lot of people have family they know are failures. Story 11. A woman called saying that she had a product liability suit involving animal crackers she gave to her daughter. I was thinking it was going to be something to do with food poisoning and keep listening. She explained that when she looked at the crackers, it looked like the monkey was holding its private part. It was a banana. This woman was mortified and ashamed. She said she told all her co-workers and they were very shocked and uncomfortable. I wanted to tell her she was nuts and that they were probably freaked out because you were talking about animal crackers with inappropriate shapes. Story 12. Not a lawyer, but my uncle once had a client trying to sue Sears for distributing pornography to minors because he caught his 12-year-old son using the lingerie section for self-pleasure. Comment, the Sears catalog. The golden years of print pornography. Kids these days are spoiled with the internet. Back in my day we had to work for the jerk. Story 13. There's a lot of them. I've been asked to evict a ghost. I actually did that one. I regularly get phone calls promising to make me a millionaire if I'll sue the police. There's the completely guilty, a person convicted of a serious, sensitive crime assaulted in him being released, then immediately charged and convicted of a more serious crime. So many, comment the ghost. Okay, so, in the first place, it's always nice to get a client from a business card you left at a diner. It means people pick those things up. However, when leaving business cards at diners in certain areas of town, I should expect some issues. This call came through on a dreary December day as I was sipping coffee and watching the snow fall. The caller ID read that it was the local hospital, and as I picked up I spoke to a rather frantic young man who informed me he was being held against his will and he needed an attorney to help him. When I asked where he was, he simply said, the 5th floor. While this may sound innocuous, every hospital has a 5th floor, where Napoleon roams the halls freely and the residents speak to their imaginary friends who may, or may not, have been an influencing factor in why they decided that clothing was a way for the government to track them, and therefore the only solution was to create poop pants to throw off the monitoring ability of the CIA. Long story short on this portion, within an hour of the call a friend had dropped off my fee, and I was en route to the 5th floor to meet with my new client. I assumed it would be an involuntary committal defense, and after speaking with my client I gauged that, while the man was most definitely in need of mental care, he was not a danger to himself or others and was unlikely to be one. He had, in my opinion, been forced to agree to being committed by his probation officer, and frankly I wasn't going to let that stand. I got the name of some contacts from his treatment plan who were willing to vouch that he had, until recently, been compliant with his medications, and contacted his social worker who was able to confirm that, yes, since he had ceased taking the medication due to an inability to afford the medications, the county would assist him with it. A slam dunk. I would simply flex my legal muscles around the mental ward and get him released, then appear in the court to defend against the involuntary committal. Within 24 hours of being committed, my client was back at home. A hearing was set a couple weeks in the future, and I did daily checks to be certain he was compliant with his medication leading up to the hearing, until the one day I didn't. A call from the local police was my tip-off. An older officer, one I was familiar with, called to advise they had responded to a disturbance at my client's home. He apparently had been screaming in an empty room loud enough that the neighbors were concerned and called the police. The police officer, a friendly sort, gauged the situation and decided my client wasn't a threat, but asked what the situation was. The ghost, my client had responded, the ghost won't get out and it won't leave me alone. Well, said the officer, I can tell it to leave. So he did. He told the ghost to leave. And then, apparently for shits and giggles, told him that it was a civil matter if the ghost refused to leave, and therefore an attorney would need to be contacted. At which point my client dropped my name, which resulted in the cop giving me a heads up. So, I call my client, who is inconsolable at the concept of sharing his home with the ghost. Keep in mind, I've been to this guy's house. This is the first I've heard of a ghost. But there is a competency hearing on the horizon, and this will not play well in front of the judge. The cop said it's a civil matter. My client repeated about the 18th time after I told him I was not, in fact, a priest, but was a lawyer and didn't know how to perform an exorcism. What do you want me to do? I snapped a bit. Evict it. There are moments in time when you should keep your mouth shut. This is one of them, because the immediate response was CANU. That'd be great. Well shit. So, long story short, I ended up driving out there with a mock-up notice to quit addressed to any spirits in possession of the property located at 1313 Mockingbird Lane, without any authority under color of law, advising them that their possession was unlawful in nature, and ordering them to quit and surrender the premises, or any portion thereof, within 15 days of the date of this notice. As I was obviously unable to obtain personal service via hand delivery, I had my client direct me to the portion of the premises the ghost occupied, an empty spare bedroom, and made service by posting the notice to the door of the room. I then announced that the ghost had been served a valid notice to quit and surrender possession, and went home. A week later, as we're preparing to enter the court for my client's competency hearing, I ask about the status. "Oh, Mr. Creepy, it worked great," my client announced. He moved out the same night and took all his stuff with him. The ghost apparently had stuff. Anyhow, I smiled and patted my client on the shoulder as I offered some sage advice. "Well, good," I said. "Now, let's not mention this in front of the judge. He might have a problem with the service and order us to let the ghost back in if he finds out about it." My client nodded enthusiastically. I kept him out of the mental hospital that day, and take some comfort knowing somewhere today this crazy bastard is still telling people about his great lawyer who got rid of his ethereal roommate for free. Edit. Hey. It's been awesome checking in and reading your comments today. Made a slow day go quick for me. However, I'm hearing the happy hour bell ringing, so I'm skedaddling. Glad you folks enjoyed this, and be nice to the lawyers in your life. We're really nice people behind the asshole flavored coating. Last edit. Also, no more gold, please. If you really are itching to spend that money cause you like this, go ahead and send it to a place like Horizon House, which can help people like my client in the above post, okay? Remember folks, the mentally ill are actually ill, and deserve just as much help as anyone else. Comment. I have 3 things about this. First is that you apparently live in Old Noir. Sipping coffee looking at snow, getting a call from 5th floor. Doing detective work calling the hospital, the probation officer, the medication. Like you're a private eye. I love it. Second, swing big lawyer dick. Third, in many schools of magic/religion, you performed an exorcism. The basics of getting rid of a spirit is essentially to call on a power greater than the spirit which can then have force over them. Priests call on the name of God, because God has a lot of power and even his name has strength. Other religions will call on certain natural forces, local spirits, or call out an intruding demon by name, as a way to strip their power via their name. You can even perform an exorcism just by shouting, "Get out of here," because you've challenged your willpower against the ghost. In your case, you came in with a binding document under the power of law. The written word has a lot of power, and the idea of who makes the rules is also very important. You came in with a written document with legal enforcement. As far as exorcisms go, that's not a bad weapon to throw against them. Even if not strictly enforceable, it's still a decently good place to start. Story 14. The day after President Obama won the election in 2008, I had a potential client cold call for a claim of copyright infringement. He wanted to sue then-President-elect Obama for having 7 U.S. flags on the podium during his acceptance speech. I asked him for a registration number so I could verify details and he hung up on me. Edit. Second most outrageous case was a potential client wanted to protect copyright, maybe patent, a Wii game with adult themes that used the Wii controller and Wii Fit. I wanted to take it, but was voted down by the firm. When I told the inventor this, he said, in a resigned voice, "Third time that's happened." I really felt bad for that inventor but put him onto another of my friends who was a solo IP lawyer. Edit 2. Some people are confused about the 7 flags thing, and upon review I can understand. The potential client claimed he had copyrighted the use of 7 flags on a stage for presentations. This is ridiculous and would never have been allowed a registration. But he didn't know that. Likely the potential client was high, drunk, or a scammer. My guess is he wanted to file a lawsuit, then sit down in a boardroom during pretrial motions and try to settle for a nominal sum. He would get a few thousand, minus lawyer fees, and go away. Unfortunately, the potential client didn't understand: 1. You need a copyright registration before you file a lawsuit. 2. you would never get a registration for having 7 flags in a backdrop of a stage. 3. That he was going to get nothing from then-President-elect Obama because he would have had a firecracker team of lawyers at his avail. And 4. Homie, don't play that. It would have been unethical for me to file that lawsuit, as I didn't think it had a chance in hell of succeeding. In other words, I thought it was frivolous and didn't want to test local Rule 11 jurisprudence, i.e., receive sanctions, or lose my license. When I asked for his reg number, that was a clue I knew what I was doing, and he bailed. Story 15. Lawyer in a small town here. I mostly do estate planning, probate, old people stuff, etc. I have a client that sued his ex-wife for not selling the house after the divorce as she was supposed to. Judge held her in contempt and asked what he wanted my client to do, and he had her thrown in jail. They are both nearly 80 years old. The client also has something valuable buried on his property for his grandchildren after he dies. I have a sealed letter in my desk that he pays me a goodly sum each month to hold and give to his grandson when the old man dies. Comment what ended up happening to the property. Is the grandson going to have to sneak in, treasure map in hand, and do some midnight digging? The property we threw the wife off of is still in the process of being sold. The man still hasn't died, so who knows what will happen then. He owns 40+ acres out in the middle of nowhere, so I imagine whatever is buried there. A woman had cut off her husband's hand maliciously and was facing time and a divorce. She wanted me to help her sue the knife manufacturer for damages. Walking to work at the moment. I could probably let you know a few more if you are interested. Source: work in law firm in Cleveland, Ohio. Story 16. Criminal prosecutor here. A patrol officer pulled over a driver for some traffic violation, I think failure to signal. After a heated roadside exchange where the driver initially refused to turn over her license, she ultimately relented and thrust the license with undue force into the officer's outstretched hand. The cop charged her with aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer. When asked to justify his actions, he stated that people need to learn to respect the police. We dismissed the charge, apologized to the defendant, and told the cop to never bring us something like that again. I can't recall if Internal Affairs was notified. I work with the police every day, and the majority of them are good people. This guy was a shit. Story 17. During law school, I was a member of a legal clinic. We represented low-income individuals under the supervision of a licensed attorney/professor. We handled family law issues, but would try to point clients in the right direction if we could not personally help them. One man came in and stated that he wanted to sue Best Buy. Which is not uncommon, but why he wanted to sue Best Buy was different. See, this man said he purchased a refurbished computer from Best Buy for his daughter as a Christmas present. Best Buy had neglected to remove the previous owner's password screen, and thus, this man and his daughter were unable to access the computer until they took it back to Best Buy, which was understandably closed on Christmas Day. This, he said, caused his 12-year-old daughter to begin to question the very existence of Santa Claus. He and his daughter then argued the rest of the day, until finally he admitted to her that there was, spoiler alert, no Santa Claus. His words were, "Seeing your daughter lose faith in Santa ruined all Christmases to come." He also claimed that now his daughter was a real bitch since she had stopped believing in Santa Claus. What was more interesting is the amount of damages he requested. He stated he believed that Best Buy owed him at least $25 million because Christmas was ruined. His daughter will never believe in Santa again, and now he has to deal with her being a real bitch. Now, I did not believe he had any type of recourse against Best Buy for inadvertently demolishing his daughter's belief in Santa. But even if I did, our clinic could not help him. I informed him that we only handled family law issues, and he should call the local bar association's lawyer referral service. He stated the bar association already told him they would not take his case. Then he proceeded to ask if I had children. I told him I did not. Then he proceeded to wish that all my future kids have their belief in Santa Claus ruined. He stated he would not help me if that happened. He then told me to get lost and left. The whole time I was wondering how this guy's daughter believed in Santa Claus till age 12. Story 18. When I was a trainee solicitor, my principal had a guy come in who spoke almost exclusively in quotes from US presidents. This was a specialist law firm in a very English town, and the dude was about as English as it's possible to be, tweed suit with leather elbow patches English. He wasn't initially anything to do with me, but half an hour into the initial meeting my principal wandered into my office totally exasperated, which I'd never seen before, and she said, paraphrasing here, Crow_eggs, you're a patient man, find out what this batshit loon actually wants. It'll be a good first case evaluation for you to handle by yourself. I spent 2 hours listening to him talk. Literally every second sentence began with, as Woodrow Wilson once said. Or, as Grover Cleveland once said. He even managed to quote Taft. I mean, even the craziest of crazy doesn't quote Taft. It's Taft, for Christ's sake. Anyway, after 2 hours I explained how much the meeting was costing him even though I was just a trainee, and he visibly sagged and said, all blurted out like a naughty child, I poured bleach on the roots of my neighbor's tree and it fell into my greenhouse. Can you make him pay for the repairs? I gently explained why that wouldn't work, and he cried, so I called the loveliest secretary in the firm who made him a cup of tea and sat with him until he went home. Story 19. Not lawyer but paralegal. I took a cold call one evening from a gentleman who was clearly high, who was clearly under the influence of some substance, and homeless. He wanted to sue his local police dispatch, 911, paramedics and a hospital. We are a civil litigation firm, because he narked on someone who was now, allegedly, trying to get him. It was now the police station's fault that he would have to stab the guy, and he repeatedly asked me if he should carry a knife so he could do said stabbing. He apparently had also asked the 911 dispatch the same question, and all they would tell him is that no, he should not in fact go stab someone. Also asked if he should go stab the other guy before he had a chance to get him. He then wanted to come hide at our office while keeping his knife and deciding where to go stab the other guy. Definitely most surreal phone call of my life thus far. And before it's asked, no, we didn't report the situation to anyone. We are in a large city and he said his location was up north, did not give us his name, and we don't have caller ID. Very old boss, hates technology because he can't use/understand it, so we really didn't have anything to give the police as far as useful information. Fun times. Comment hidden in there, he actually had an interesting legal question regarding self-defense. He knows someone's going to kill him, the police aren't helping, and he wanted to know exactly what proactive steps he could take in the direction of his own self-defense before breaking laws. Too bad he couldn't communicate that question too well. Story 20. I got a call from a client I had represented in the past, wanting me to help out her son. He and his girlfriend wanted to get married, but she was under 18, so she needed permission from her parents, and they wouldn't give permission. We chatted about it for a while and then she told me it was an urgent matter, because the girl was pregnant. I said, wait, how old did you say she was? Mom said, 14, I said, and how old is your son? Mom said, 20, I said, you need to immediately hire a criminal defense lawyer to help you with this. And then I had to explain to her why her son had a bigger problem than not being able to get married. Edit, this was in the southern US. In this situation, there was an extremely high chance that the son could be charged with statutory rape and child molestation. I didn't look up the laws, so I don't know if her being pregnant would have allowed them to get married without consent. Even if they did get married, he could still be charged. They never called me back, so I don't know for sure what happened, but I knew the family and I don't think I ever saw the son's name pop up on any court dockets, so I guess it all worked out in the end and nobody made a fuss about him knocking up a 14-year-old, uneasy face. Story 21. Not a lawyer yet. I'm in my last semester of law school and about to take my last ever law school final today. As a law student, you have the option of doing a lot of low-level pro bono work. I was at a family court as part of a project to help abused women get restraining orders against their abusers. To look lawyerly, all of us law students dressed up in suits. Family court tends to be filled with pro-se fillers, people representing themselves. So, anyone dressed in a suit starts attracting all of the people who don't want to deal with the issues themselves, since, hey, they look like a lawyer. This one gentleman came up to me and my partner, another law student, asking us if we could help him file a restraining order against his girlfriend because she wrote on her Facebook wall that he had a small penis, which he assured us wasn't true. He also wanted to get a restraining order against a different ex-girlfriend because she took some of his clothes and things when they broke up and he wanted them back. He also wanted to get a restraining order against his brother for beating him up when he was a kid. He was in his 30s. Edit. Thanks everyone for the encouragement. The admin final went well. One more tomorrow. And to anyone else in finals, you've got it. To the people saying he could get an order for libel. Probably not. Libel requires showing of harm, and that would be a pretty tricky thing to prove, especially in the state we are in. Furthermore, getting a temporary restraining order through a family court is a little goofy. Also, the conversion claim. Yes, that's technically true, but what the guy described was maybe $50 max of clothing. A restraining order would not solve that problem. And, sadly, it'd be hard to capture the rambling, bizarre speech patterns of this gentleman. Story 22. I remember a guy called me and wanted to take action against the post office. He had received a letter from them saying that they would no longer deliver packages to him as he was never appropriately dressed when he opened the door to accept them. I remember being nervous about asking him to elaborate. Story 23. My parents are both attorneys. Most recently, their batshit crazy neighbor asked my dad to serve as his attorney in a slip and fall suit against my parents. He had come over unannounced and uninvited at 6 a.m. on a snowy morning and fell down our driveway. My dad was the one who helped him up and called the ambulance on his behalf. The next day, crazy neighbor dropped off legal documents in my parents' mailbox for my dad to look over to see if he had a case against my dad. And this is why I hate people. Story 24. Someone just asked me to modify their child support because they lost their job. The kid is 17 years, 11 months old. Get out of my office. Edit. For some clarity, in my state, child support always ends at 18 or 19 if the child is pursuing a high school diploma or GED at an accredited institution. This child has already graduated HS. Story 25. Not a lawyer, but worked in a law firm. Had a potential client who needed to access something on a high shelf when she was at work. Instead of using the step that was provided, she took it upon herself to take her shoes off, then stand on her chair to reach the shelf. She forgot about her own shoes on the way down and tripped over them. She tried to blame her employers. That's not how it works, love. There was another woman using a vacuum cleaner in her own home and she tripped over the lead. When we asked who it was in particular, she intended to sue, as there was nothing wrong with the vacuum cleaner, and no actual injury. She became confused and confessed she did not know. She just thought she could claim from someone. Pretty tame examples, but amusing at the time. Some people just need saving from themselves. Edit. This was in the UK, for all those wondering.